Tonight, we concluded chapter 31, and we began the class by looking at the two final thoughts of the Rebbe, the enormous joy when we understand our soul's point being here, and the ascent, the elevation she's attaining, and the even more amazing situation when we actually give God darkness. When we elevate the darkness of world, the darkness of self, and we give that to God. Hope you'll enjoy. Please share with someone who can benefit and drop a like. All right, so we are toward the very end of the chapter. It's very possible we are going to finish. It's very possible we're going to start the next one. So we will see what happens. We are holding, as I said, toward the very end of chapter 31. What we were discussing in the chapter was moving this person from sadness to joy. And we spoke about his joy. We spoke about joy on 4 levels. We spoke about the idea of freeing the soul, that sense of mission, that sense of accomplishment, which creates tremendous joy. We spoke about the joy of feeling the soul's joy in getting free and really tuning into the joy of the soul. And then at the end of the chapter, what we're just doing now, we're speaking about the joy in fulfilling, in a sense, you could say, God's reasons for creation. We said, why did God do it this way? Why did he take himself, literally, our soul is him, and put it in this reality with all the pains, all the hardship, everything we're going through? And we all just went through the 9th above, and you take time then to reflect historically, cosmically, as a people, everything we've gone through. Like, God, why are you doing this? The Alter Rebbe says there's a reason, there's a purpose, there's a tremendous gain, a tremendous shift for our soul being in this world, and even more intense, the shift that we cause in the evil through working with it, through transforming it, and through giving it to God. And that's what we're about to read and what we were discussing. So why did God do it this way? What was God thinking? What's God doing it this way for? To take a piece, to descend, a piece of his very self, his very light. Not just godliness, but literally a piece of him. The core of our soul is from the core of God's essence and being. So everything in this world is godliness. Everything in this world is his energy. But our soul's not just his energy. Our soul is him. So why did he take this piece of self? God, meaning God that fills all the worlds, God that encompasses all the worlds. God for whom all the world is nothing. That's the level of God that's my soul. Put in the skin of a snake. Tipa Sarucha, the spoiled drop. There's only one reason. I'm not going to use the word justification. It's much deeper than that. There's one reason. And the reason is, and this is an axiom, this is a Hasidic principle, this is how God works, this is how the world works, this is how we work. A descent is only for the purpose of the ascent. The only legitimacy in any situation that seems to be down is for the up that's created specifically by that down. And that works on every single level. It works by God, which is why it works by us, which is works by in our world, it works in our life. So by God, God's constriction of self, he had to do a lot of constrictions of self for creation to happen, is only for something greater that's going to be produced by creation. In our lives, if we're ever in a space where it seems like we're in a down, of course, we all have times like that in our life. And that's part of, as we're saying here, the process and the journey. But as Rebbe says very, very strongly in the last completely edited talk we have from the Rebbe in 1992, Rebbe says for a Jew, we can't even call it a down. Can't even call that. It's the process of the up. Whatever situation we're in, if it seems like it's a down and we say, well, it's temporary, well, there's going to be something good from it, well. No, the Rebbe says. is much stronger than that. It's part of the process of the ascent. It's part of the upward journey. It's very important to hold into your heart and in your mind, because obviously it doesn't feel that way. Maybe later we'll look back and realize, but when we're in it, it just feels like down. And they're saying there's no such thing for God, no such thing in this world, and no such thing for the Jew. So the Rebbe is saying, if that's true here, as the Alter Rebbe is applying this in this point in Tanya, if we're saying there's no such thing as a down, well, what did God do to my soul then? This is ascent. Ascent for him, core of my soul is him, and ascent for the soul. And as we discussed last week, all the ways my soul can only gain here through the concealments, can have that one-on-one connection with God himself, can give to God, can serve God irrationally, can self-sacrifice for God. All of those things are only possible here. Above, they're not possible. You can't be irrational above. It all makes sense. You can't self-sacrifice above. It's all him. You can't give to God above. You can't be one with God above. So the tremendous down is for the tremendous ascent my soul is enjoying and creating in this seeming down space. And so too in our lives, always in our lives. We should always keep that in mind. And I'm sure people here have experienced that. I don't know if anyone would like to share when they went through something that seemed down, and then they realized how it really was something such God's kindness, such God's benefit, and how they grew in ways they would never have grown if they weren't in that situation. Anyone want to chime in on that? I know we all have experiences, not necessarily we're comfortable in sharing all of them in a public forum, but anyone would like to join on that point? But we have. Think about it, reflect times you've been in a state that seemed like a down. And can you look back and reflect and see the gain, the growth? And now the Rebbe is saying it wasn't a down. No such thing. It was part of your upward journey. Thank you. Got someone up there saying yes. And now the Rebbe says it's even more than that. It's not only all the gains your soul is achieving and enjoying and creating for herself and for God. The biggest gain of our journey in this world is giving God klipa. Klipa meaning giving God that concealment, giving God those places that seem dark, those places that seem that God's not found there. And as we work through this world and we use those areas also, and they're also part of our journey and part of our tools and part of how we're giving to God, that's the greatest gift. That's the greatest high. That's the ultimate, and as the Alter Rebbe writes here, the purpose of it all. The halos lavaya kol nefesh hachiyunis habahamis. So beyond the joy of what my soul is accomplishing, and it's really, even if it seems hard, it is hard. It seems hard. It is hard. But when I put in perspective what I'm accomplishing, what I'm doing, what I'm achieving, the reason why my soul's in this world, it's so good. But then there's an even greater good, greater than the good elevation of my soul from what seemed like the descent. There's a much greater elevation, a much greater gain, far greater than the gain of my soul is the gain of my animal. And why am I saying it's a far greater gain? Because my soul is God's essence. Every one of us. The I of me, the I of all of us is God. God's essence. The essence of the soul of the Jew is literally from the essence of God. So even though we said, wow, how we are gaining by our journey, and we are, and everything I said is valuable, and those were just 4 points that came to my mind. There are many more. Right now, my soul is connecting to God and his essence and being, which none of the souls in the Garden of Eden in heaven above can do. Only when you're very masked, very cloaked in this world can you touch God and survive the process until Mashiach. And I'm giving to God here. The souls above can receive, they can't give. I'm giving to God right now. We are studying God's will and wisdom. We are giving to him. We made blessings today. We are giving to him. We gave charity today. We are giving to him. We prayed today. We are giving to him. Souls can't do that above. And many times in our lives, we serve God even though it didn't make sense. And many times in our lives, we sacrifice for God. So there's been an enormous journey and progression for my soul and for all of our souls. But notwithstanding that journey, our souls are pretty amazing anyway. Before my soul entered this world, she's a piece of God's essence. And by the way, she's been here many times. So she's grown very strong and powerful in all of her journeys. That's why we're the last and final trip. And that's why our souls are so great. And that's why God demands so much from us, because we are very, very powerful people. So before my soul entered this lifetime, she was quite amazing. And now she's growing even more. And she's giving God even more. So it's even more of the amazing journey of the amazing soul. But then there's evil. Then there's where God doesn't see what seems to be an obstruction, a barrier, a concealment. So when we go to those dark places and we give that to God, that's like, wow, that's like something new. That's like something, so to speak, God doesn't have. My soul he has. Is him, is his child, is his essence, it's his self. Evil, of course, within evil is God, but you don't sense God within the evil. That's the idea of evil. Klipa, the term Kabbalah uses for that, is literally means a shell, a husk, which means a barrier, which means we don't sense God in it. We can't touch God in it. We can't feel God in it. So when we interact with all of the things in this world where God is obstructed, and we use those things for God, we transform them for God. We crush them for God. We elevate them for God. God's getting something, so to speak, he didn't have. Something new, something amazing that's never existed until we got involved. And that's the elevation of the evil only possible by me, by you, by a Jew interacting with the various levels of forbidden of this world. Now, of course, within this world, as we've discussed, there are those things that are absolutely forbidden because God says, don't. 365 biblical prohibitions and thousands added by the rabbis. And there's many, many things in this world that are not forbidden, but they're not innately godly in a way that it's obvious. So therefore, their energy also is from this level that we call klipa, again, which means a shell, a husk, a barrier to God's energy. So if I would look at gossip, that's forbidden. Yeah, it really is, biblically. If I would look at a cup of water, that doesn't make us feel like, ooh, evil, forbidden. But that also there, God's energy is concealed behind barriers. So if I'm looking at the gossip, the way I serve God is by not doing it. I want it, I'm tempted, and I say, no, I'm not going to serve idols today. I'm not going to go there. I'm giving God something he never had before. And when I take water, such an innocuous thing, water, but its energy is concealed by layer, by barrier. And I use that water to serve God. I make a blessing on it. I drink it. I make a blessing afterwards. I use its energy to serve. I have more energy in me. I'm a little more awake. I can do things I couldn't do before. I'm looking at a cup on my table that was inspiring this example. I gave God that water. Well, God didn't have the water. He did, but in a covert form because it was hidden. Its energy was hidden behind layers of klipa, behind husks, shells, concealing it. And when I use it for God, I'm stripping all that away. It's all gone. And the energy has now become part of God's overt reality. And that's the highest level in the sense of the joy I can attain in this chapter. When I think of what I'm accomplishing,
I think of what I have the ability to do because I'm a Jew. God put me in this world. There's only 15 million of us. Each one of us is very special and very precious. God gave us the ability to create something new, to give him something he didn't have before. Because he didn't have it until I interacted with it and used it for him. When I think about it, I think of my power. I think of how I'm giving God something he didn't have. And now he has. Because of my involvement in it. That's literally the greatest joy we're thinking of in this joy. Any questions on any of this before I continue reading? Okay, you can feel free to ask the questions. You can feel free to chat the question. You could chat them to the group. You could chat them just to me. So we said what we're doing is giving God my whole animal energy. Now, why am I saying specifically my animal energy here? Because I'm in this world. In a sense, you could think small, you could think big, and you could think small, and you could think concurrently both, and they're both true. So big, I'm here to give God this world. Narrow that vision, and it's not taking away that vision. I'm here to give God myself, those darker pieces of myself, my animal soul, my body, because my animal soul and my body are that same level of, as we said, klipa. It's a husk, it's a barrier. It's an obstruction of God's energy. Again, they're not forbidden. As we've explained, there's the level of straight godliness, like my godly soul. There's a level of that which is energized by what we're going to call evil, meaning absolutely forbidden. You serve God by not doing it. Like anything God said, don't. And anything the rabbi said, don't. And then the bulk of this world, things that are not godly and not forbidden. Things that are permissible, but their energy is obstructed. The God in them is concealed behind the barrier. And I serve God by using them for him and thereby removing those barriers and shifting them from this land, from this space of concealment to a revelation of God's energy. And that's the newness I'm giving to God by serving him that way. So I spoke before about the water, but think deeper. That's the thing of this world that I give to God. The main thing.
It's a